Hello all and welcome to another episode of Cooking with Rob. I am your host. My name is Rob. Very excited to be sharing with you today a recipe I've discovered in the past month that has filled my heart with joy. It is tasty, nutritious, delicious, and all kinds of good. It is a bowl utilizing kale, mushrooms, baby potatoes, rosemary, a whole bunch of stuff. I'm gonna run through the ingredients for you in a moment. Let's get ready to have some fun. What are we gonna need to make this recipe? We are going to need 2 pounds of baby potatoes. Shameless plug for the little potato company. I love these guys. So you're gonna need about 1.5 bags of these to make 2 pounds. Then 16-ounce cremini mushrooms, 1 can of navy beans if you can find them, or any bean of your choice that you want to use just to give us a little protein in the bowl. I love navy beans because they're really small, less detectable than a big white kidney bean, so they kind of hide in to the other ingredients. Wonderful little guys. Next, soy sauce. You're going to need some green kale. This is my favorite type of kale, the kale that looks like this, not too bitter. Rosemary, that's fresh rosemary. You're gonna need a few sprigs of that. A couple tablespoons of tahini, a ingredient that's always in my cupboard because of all the hummus that I make. Balsamic vinegar and some olive oil. And that's it, that's all you're gonna need. The first step that we gotta get going is preheating our oven to, let me check, 450. That's 450, so I'm gonna get that going. And then next we're gonna get our baby potatoes on some baking sheets because those gotta get started right away. See you in a sec. Okay, so the oven is preheating to 450. I've got my baby potatoes on the baking sheet with 1 tablespoon olive oil to coat them. I'm not gonna cut them or anything, I'm gonna leave them whole. They're gonna end up baking for 35 to 40 minutes. Get really nice and soft, buttery on the inside. Next, I'm working on a marinade for my mushrooms. And I've added a few liquids here in the bowl. I've added 1 tablespoon olive oil, 3 tablespoons soy sauce, 4 tablespoons balsamic vinegar. Next, I'm going to dice up 1 tablespoon of the rosemary. So the first time I diced up rosemary, I don't know, I thought you were supposed to include the stem. That was a bad choice. So definitely get all the little bits off the stem into a little pile. You're probably looking at 2 or 3 sprigs to make a tablespoon. And then you're gonna dice up those really small, because you want them to be relatively undetectable in the marinade, and add them to your sauce. Oven is almost preheated, so those are still waiting to go in, those potatoes. But I've got my marinade made, and the longer the mushrooms marinate, the better. So I'm gonna work on starting to dice those now. I would recommend quartering the mushrooms, so we have like a little bit thicker chunks. So if they're small, quarter them. You can cut them into smaller pieces if you want. Really, it's up to you, however you want to eat these. But I prefer a little bit chunkier, little quarters. I'm gonna add those to the bowl and then just let them marinate well. The potatoes cook for those 35 to 40 minutes. Oven's preheated, so it's time to get those baby potatoes in. So again, we're gonna give these quite a bit of time in there, 35 to 40 minutes, because we want to get them nice and creamy. Okay, so once you've got your mushrooms all diced, you just want to mix them into your marinade, make sure they're nice and coated. Don't worry about using all of that liquid though, because we're actually going to save it and it's gonna turn into our sauce that we drizzle on top of the bowl at the end. So just make sure that the mushrooms are coated, and then we'll let those sit while the baked potatoes roast in the oven. Okay, so those potatoes are still baking away. Mushrooms are marinating. I've rinsed my navy beans over here. And I've also rinsed my kale because I'm gonna start preparing that. Now, it's so important when you're working with kale to remove the stem. So when you're cutting away the leaves, you just wanna basically get rid of that main stem that runs down the middle, the thick stem. That's what carries that really bitter flavor. You wanna make sure you get that out of there. And then we're gonna add all of those leafy bits into a bowl and massage them with 1 tablespoon olive oil, maybe a little bit less, maybe just a drizzle of olive oil and some salt. We'll massage that, and then we're gonna place that at the bottom of our bowls for everything to be served on top of once it all comes together. Okay, so my timer went off, which means my potatoes are done, which means it's time to put the oven mitt on, which means it's time to take the potatoes out of the oven. Here they come. Look at those tasty, buttery little baby potatoes. All right, the next step is to get the mushrooms and the navy beans distributed throughout the pan. So we're just gonna spread those around the potatoes in the gaps. Do the same thing with the mushrooms. Just remember, reserve the liquid that is left over from the marinade. So I like to do this the old-fashioned way. I just grab the mushrooms in my hand, sprinkle them over the baking sheet into the gaps. I'll probably shuffle them around with a spatula just to make it a more consistent layer rather than a pile. But you can see they're all nicely marinated. And it's gonna fill the sheet pan right up. But it does all fit on one sheet pan. And I love sheet pan recipes because typically they make less mess and they're just nice and easy. As you can see over here, I've got my massaged kale ready to plate in my bowls for the base. A little bit of olive oil and salt on there. Now I'm gonna put the mushrooms back in the oven for 5 to 7 minutes. Just looking for a spatula to just even out my layer here. So 5 to 7 minutes, and that's just gonna heat up the mushrooms and the beans. Potatoes can go back in, continuing to just get creamier and creamier and more delicious. And then when we pull them out, we'll serve them on top of the kale in the bowls. It's gonna be beautiful. Okay, now it's time to make our sauce out of the marinade. I love this part because it's using everything up. So rather than having that wasted marinade juice left over, I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons tahini. Now it says in the recipe to actually add water. I did that the first time and I found the sauce is a little thinner than I would have liked. I'm actually gonna add another half tablespoon of tahini just because I like a thicker sauce. I prefer it to almost turn into a gravy. So whisk that up. You can see it's still pretty thin. That's what's gonna end up getting drizzled over our kale and heated mushrooms, beans, and potatoes. And you'll be able to even save some for leftovers. It's the best part. The sauce is so good. It's almost time to eat, which means it's time to dance. No, it's not. It's time to serve it up. All right, we've got our potatoes, our mushrooms, and our beans over here. I'm just gonna scoop those directly onto the kale. Might actually soften the kale up a little bit, which I like, give it a little wilting effect. I'm gonna put it right on top there, kind of split the bowl half and half. You can see how I've done here. And then I'm just gonna take my sauce and give it a little drizzle, a little love, a little drizzle on top. That was quite a generous drizzle. That's okay. It's just gonna make someone really happy.
Me.
Nice drizzle there. And there you have it. A sheet pan recipe with kale, baby potatoes, mushrooms, navy beans, rosemary, balsamic vinaigrette. We could name all the ingredients, but we already did that. It's gonna be delicious. Thank you so much for coming by for another episode of Cooking with Rob. I hope you make this. I hope you enjoy it. We'll see you next time.